Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Zack Bodner, CEO, Oshman Family JCC.
Welcome. Welcome to our 4th annual Zionism 3.0 conference. Yeah. Clearly, as you can all see, this is by far our largest Z3 ever. 1,100 people, a sellout crowd. This is, something spectacular. We had to put up this tent on the new Freedom Ridge Community Park. We overflowed the gym. So welcome here. This is going to be a very special year, a very special moment. And why? Because this is the year that we're launching the Z3 movement. This is the year that we partnered with Reut so that each of you could take something home today, so that you could continue this conversation, so that you could be a part of ensuring that Israel-world-Jew relations would improve, would move forward. You know, what happened was last year, after our 3rd successful Zionism 3.0, we had people all over the country that came to us and said, help us do something like this, because in our own communities, Israel has unfortunately become a divisive topic. Israel has unfortunately become a toxic subject, so we can't even touch it. So JCCs and synagogues and federations and JCRCs, they came to us and they said, help us do something like Z3. So that's what we're doing here today. We have over 80 speakers from around the world, a third of whom are from Israel. This conversation really, yes. And today our promise to you is to give you the tachlis, to give you the brass tacks that you need to go back home and help launch this movement back in your own communities. This is something very, very special. And it wouldn't have happened but for an army of volunteers and staff and lay leaders. People who have been up, our committee, our staff, working around the clock. But there are some very important people that I want to call out and I want to thank, because this would not have happened but for their generosity and their support. From day one, back in 2014 when we started this, Orly and Zack have been our champions. They really have. And they continue to be amongst our most generous supporters. To the Renat family, thank you for all that you do, really. And then this year, when we realized we had an opportunity to do something bigger and even better, it was the Rodan family that came to us. Amnon, Katie, Alana, thank you. Thank you for making the shidduch. They said, you, Zack, you got to talk to Gidi. What the JCC is doing and what Reut is doing in Israel, that has to be connected. We have to build this movement together. And it was really the Rodans that brought us together, so thank you. And then the Rands came forward. Gary and Kathy, thank you for your support from day one. From day one, back in 2015. And you continue to be our major sponsors today. Thank you. Our partners in this movement, you got it. You believed in us. You saw what this could be. Thank you so much. And there have been foundations and generous sponsors who have come out. From the very beginning, the Koret Foundation, the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco, the Honey Foundation, and Bank Leumi, you guys have been there from the beginning. Thank you, really. And then there are organizations that have thrown their full weight behind this. The Shalom Hartman Institute has a half a dozen scholars here today. Thank you to Hartman, really. The URJ, the Union for Reform Judaism, has sent its leadership from Israel and America here to be with us today. Thank you to the URJ. To the Israel Policy Forum and JCCA, both of the CEOs, the national CEOs, are here with us. Thank you, David, Doron. Thank you for being with us. This has been nothing short of a massive community-wide effort. There have been schools and synagogues, and every JCC in the area has backed this, and I just want to say thank you. On behalf of everyone here at the OFJCC, thank you for all you have done to already make this a success, and hopefully it is going to be a great day. Now, before I go on, I want to ask you to call your attention to the big screens behind me for a very special message from the President of the State of Israel.
My dear friends, greeting to all of you from Jerusalem. It is good to be with you today. Making miracles here and there is a wonderful title for your conference. Today, 70 years since the establishment, Israel is a strong country. We enjoy a vibrant and stable democracy, economic growth, increasing exports, and low unemployment rate. Today, Israel is a world high-tech power, a world center of excellence, in the field of cyber, technology, water, and agriculture. Every 8 hours, a new startup is born in Israel that seeks to change the world. We will never forget that the global Jewish community is a full partner in the great miracle. Israel is a great success story, but there is still more to do. We invite you all to be with us, to share the challenges with us, to make miracles together. As people, as nation, we share history and values, past and future. That brings us closer together. As a people, as a nation, we also face anti-Semitism, terror, and prejudice in all its forms and all the ways they are acting. The awful attack in Pittsburgh last month is a terrible warning. Anti-Semitism is here, amongst us. We must not ignore it. We will not tolerate it. Let's work together. כאיש אחד, בלב אחד, as we say in Hebrew. Bless you all.
Okay, I don't know about you, but it's not every day that the president of Israel addresses your local JCC. That's pretty remarkable, right? That should give you a sense of how important the work is that we're doing here today. So, I have a question for you. Why is this Z3 different from all other Z3s? Yes, I know that sounds very Passover-y, and we're in the Hanukkah moment. I'll come back to Hanukkah. But this is a different Z3. This is a different moment because we're launching the movement today, because we've partnered with Reut, but also because this is the year we start to talk about healing. For the last 3 of these conferences, we've talked about the issues that divide us. And our community gets it. We're all talking about it now. Every Jewish conference is about what is dividing us. And now it's time to talk about how to heal. Right now it's time to talk about how to move forward, how to unite us, and that's what we're doing today. How to unite a divided people. That's the theme of our conference today. This is the moment. The good news is we have the answer, right? It's about our shared legacy, it's about our shared destiny, and it's about our shared sense of peoplehood. Jewish peoplehood. We're bigger than a religion, bigger than a nation. We are a people. Jewish peoplehood is what unites us. It brings us together in unity. Not uniformity, not unanimity, but unity. Unity with our diversity. Look, we're under no delusions here. We will continue to have differences. We are the Jewish people, after all. There have been differences since the beginning of time. There will be differences till the end of time. It may take the Messiah to iron out our... you know what? Actually, not even him. We saw that story before. He's the Messiah. He's not the Messiah. Who knows? There are always going to be differences. The reality is, we know this. We're not naive. We're not Pollyannish. Even in this week's Torah portion, we're reading about Joseph and his brothers. Talk about division amongst brothers, right? But even at the end of the day, they were still brothers. And in every generation, we are arguing amongst ourselves. There is that division. You know, the great rabbis Hillel and Shammai, they disagreed about just about everything, every halachic decision. They even disagreed on how to light the Hanukkah candles. Shammai believed that on the first night we should light them all, and then on each successive night we should take one away. Clearly, Hillel won that argument as well. And do you know why the sages tell us that we side with Hillel? In most of the decisions, it's because he let Shammai go first. He acknowledged Shammai's position. That's an important thing to acknowledge today. It's an important thing for us to think about. But folks, we're under no delusions that our differences are going to go away. If even in our darkest hour, during the Shoah, there were divisions amongst our people, as there were. The Jewish partisan fighters in the woods argued mercilessly with the Jews on the councils in the ghettos about how best to save Jewish lives. And in the end, they both agreed that they could have done more. When the modern state of Israel was being reborn, world Jewry, American Jewry, was divided over whether or not to support the birth of the Jewish state. And yet when 5 Arab armies attacked the nascent Jewish state, we put aside our differences and everyone came together. But even the underground armies, that were fighting for the liberation of Israel. Even they were at odds, the Irgun and the Haganah. Let me tell you a story. It's a story about my father-in-law, Eli, who was born in 1938 Palestine. His family, a conservative Sephardic family, emigrated from Saloniki, Greece. And they were big followers of Zev Jabotinsky, of revisionist Zionism, big supporters of the Irgun, the more right-leaning underground army under Menachem Begin. And my father-in-law remembers being 10 years old and standing on the beach in Tel Aviv, Frishman Beach, and watching as Ben-Gurion's army, the Haganah, sank the Altalena. The Altalena was the Irgun's arms ship, carrying much-needed arms for this tiny little army. The Irgun refused to turn the arms over to the Haganah, and the Haganah sank the ship. That memory is seared into my father-in-law's memory, and yet still, years later, he married a nice Ashkenazi Israeli girl, the daughter of a Czech and a German, big Ben-Gurion supporters. Talk about a mixed marriage. But even they, even Ben-Gurion and Jabotinsky, despite their differences, even they could come together and recognize their brotherhood. In a famous letter Ben-Gurion wrote to Jabotinsky, he said, "Whatever may happen in Zionism in the future, my hand will always be extended to you in times of friendship and stress, in spite of all party opposition." And Jabotinsky wrote back, "I grasp your hand in true friendship." Folks, we are a brotherhood, a sisterhood. That's the analogy I want to make today. No longer should we be talking about the analogy of marriage partners, world Jewry and Israeli Jewry, because what can happen in marriages, they can break up. We can get divorced. Brothers, sisters, we're still siblings at the end of the day. We can fight, we can go to war with each other, but we are still brothers and sisters at the end of the day. And that brings me to our brotherhood with Reut, our partners in Israel. Reut is a phenomenal think tank, a strategic organization in Israel led by Giddy Greenstein, and they're really thinking about how world Jewry and Israel relations are paramount for Israel's future, how it impacts Israel's identity and Israel's national security. They've been doing phenomenal work for years on the ground in Israel, and we're thrilled to have partnered with them today. And I'd like to ask all of those who are part of this coalition in Israel, all of the organizations from Israel, please stand up. Stand up so we can acknowledge you here today. Stand up. This has been a wonderful, yes. There are 24. Too many of these Israelis are uncharacteristically shy right now, and I don't know why. But there are over 24 of these organizations as part of this coalition who are here. Thank you for partnering with us. What makes this moment different is this coalition and the movement, which is built on these 5 principles, the 5 principles that are on the wall here, the 5 principles on this screen. Number 1, Israel is the state where the entire Jewish people exercises its right to self-determination. Number 2, Israel and world Jewry are 2 centers equal in their significance for Jewish destiny. Number 3, a vibrant diaspora is a Zionist imperative. That's right. Number 4, peoplehood. Peoplehood is the binding formative ideal of world Jewry and Israel. And number 5, this movement, our movement, is a cross-partisan movement encompassing the full diversity of Jewish life and expression. That's what the Z3 movement is all about. That's what 21st century Zionism is all about. Now, why Z3? Some of you may be asking. Well, because this is the 3rd era of Zionism, which was always meant to be an evolving ideology. Z1 was the pre-1948 Zionism of Theodor Herzl, of the pioneers, of the if you will it is no dream. Zionism 2.0 was the 1948 till roughly 2000 turn of the century Zionism. That was the Zionism of the builders, of Ben-Gurion, of Rav Kook, of A.D. Gordon. That was the Zionism defined by the ingathering of the exiles. It was a Zionism defined by the negation of the diaspora. This idea that there is no future for Judaism in the diaspora, that because of anti-Semitism and assimilation, the future for Judaism only lies in Israel. And therefore, those of us in the diaspora, we have an obligation to support Israel politically, financially, unequivocally. That was Z2. And we're saying we're at a different moment now. We're in a different era where there's now both a strong Jewish homeland and a strong Jewish diaspora. For the first time ever in Jewish history, both a strong Jewish homeland and a strong Jewish diaspora. Think about what that means. These 2 centers of Jewish life are contributing to the Jewish future in phenomenal ways. Look at what Israel has done. In 70 short years, Israel has resurrected basically a dead language. Hebrew is a modern language. We know there are Hebrew newspapers and Hebrew novels, but now there are libraries filled with Hebrew novels that are making it on the New York Times bestseller list. There are Hebrew television shows being played on Netflix around the world. There are Hebrew movies being nominated for Oscars and international film festivals around the world. There are Hebrew rock stars and rock groups, hip-hop and rap. How great was it to see Netta win the Eurovision Awards this year? This is what Israel is contributing to the world and world Jewry today. Israeli art and technology based on Jewish themes and Jewish values. Israel Aid and organizations like it are changing what it means to save lives, not just Jewish lives, but lives. Meanwhile, look what's happening with North American Jewry today. North American Jewry is changing what it means to do Jewish. Yes, we use that verb, to do Jewish. North American Jewry is offering real alternatives to traditional Judaism, real alternatives to text study. You have organizations like Sefaria that are putting all of our sacred texts online, democratizing text study. You have organizations like One Table that are making it cool to do Shabbat dinners for millennials around the country. You have organizations that are making the hiking trail and the forest and the garden part of Jewish life today. Urban Adamah, Wilderness Torah, Adventure Rabbi. These are great organizations being built in many cases by millennials. North American Jewry is changing what it means to do Jewish for the future. Two great centers of Jewish life, changing the future of Judaism. We must keep us together. We must keep us running on parallel paths and intersecting and not diverging. This is truly a situation where 1 + 1 is greater than more than 2, but 1 and 1 separate could have devastating consequences. Israel's national security depends on world Jewry support. Absolutely. And world Jewry is stronger and safer because of a strong Israel. We can hold our heads up higher and be more confident because there's a Jewish state and a Jewish army to rescue imperiled Jews wherever they are, in Russia, in Ethiopia, and in Entebbe. That's what it means to have two great centers of Jewish life. But here's the rub. We need a new way for interacting with each other. The old way, the old paradigm, the old model, it doesn't work. Too paternalistic. The American wagging our finger at Israel, telling them they're not doing this right or they're not doing that right, no longer. And the Israeli way of looking down their noses at us saying, you're not real Jews, Judaism's going to go away because of your intermarriage and your watered-down Judaism, not right for the future. We need a new paradigm. A new paradigm. Z3 is defined by having a stake and a say. If Zionism 2.0 is about having a stake and no say, Z3 is about having a stake and a say. Now let me be clear. What Z3 is calling for, and let me be clear on what Z3 is not calling for. Z3 is not saying that world Jewry should have a seat at the table in determining Israel's security decisions. Israel's a sovereign country. It's going to make its own security decisions. Z3 is saying world Jewry needs a seat at the table in a consultative relationship in helping determine the future of issues that determine our heritage, our legacy, our identity, and our religiosity. That's what Z3 is about. But again, we have to do it as brothers and sisters. We have to do it with a warm embrace, a loving embrace, the same way we did when we were freeing the Jews in the former Soviet Union. We didn't ask them, what are your politics? How observant are you? How religious are you? We didn't care. We just embraced them and recognized they were part of our people. That's the same way we have to look at each other today. Israeli Jews, world Jews, we have to recognize there are miracles happening in both places, real miracles. And that brings me to the theme of the conference, making miracles here and there. Obviously a play on the dreidel. Okay, here's a question, by a show of hands. Don't be shy. How many of you did not know that in Israel they have a different dreidel than the rest of the world, diaspora Jewry? Okay, pretty cool, right? It makes sense because our Sham, is Israel's Po, is Israel's here. If this doesn't embody the differences between us, I don't know what does. We have two separate dreidels. That's why today you are all receiving a brand new dreidel. A dreidel created by the Z3 movement, a 5-sided dreidel that has all 5 letters, Nes Gadol, Haya, Sham, and Po. That's a symbol of what we're trying to do here today. We need to bridge these two centers of Jewish life. We're the ones who are going to do this. We're going to send you home with real tools on how to take this back to your community. By the way, good luck playing the dreidel. You'll figure it out soon. That's for next year's conference. One last thing about Hanukkah, and then I'll be eager to introduce our keynote speaker. This is Hanukkah. The Hanukkah story is an incredible story. It's a story, yes, about the Maccabees' triumph, but it's a story about pluralism, about religious freedom. The Maccabees were fighting against a tyranny that said there's only one way to worship. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here, saying there's more than one way. There's your way and our way. There's here and there. There's Israeli Jewry, there's world Jewry. We can bridge these two gaps. Let's work on this together, starting right now. Thank you very much. Okay. Before I introduce our keynote, there's one ground rule for today. One ground rule and only one ground rule. It's the same ground rule that we've had since year one, which is treat everyone here like a guest in our house, because that's what they are. Every speaker is a guest in our house. You can disagree, and you should disagree, but do so respectfully. Disagree like you would with your crazy Uncle Bernie around the Shabbat table. That's how you disagree. That's the one rule. Now, with no further delay, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a man who truly needs no introduction, New York Times best-selling author, our first keynote speaker, David Brooks.
Thank you so much. Is this on? Can you hear me back there? No. Can we turn on this mic? There we go. This is a very impressive event. I'm very honored to be here. And I know I should be brief. I know a lot of people in the room are Jewish, and you didn't come here to hear me speak. You came here to hear yourself speak. And so I will try to get out of the way of that. I thought the way I could help heal any divides between American and Israeli Jews is by making a series of gross generalizations about the Israelis. That always works. And so I'm going to make a few, and then before we get on my remarks. The one thing I've noticed about Israel is they're very fraternal. About 5 years ago, I was driving in Tel Aviv, and I was in a little car, and a bus was turning onto my narrow street, and he beeped at me to back up so he could get through. So I backed up, and I backed right into the car of an Israeli behind me. And he got out, and he looked furious. And he got out and started running, and he ran right past me and started screaming at the bus driver. And then he came back to me and gave me a hug, because we were brothers in the war against bus drivers. And we were doing well, and then we're doing our paperwork and all that stuff, and another bus, totally unrelated, passes by. He runs away and starts screaming at that bus driver. And so I made a friend that day. The second generalization is that a lot of Israelis don't recognize the difference between public life and private life. So I had a friend of mine who was depositing money at a bank years ago when you still had checked lines, and somebody said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to deposit some money." And she said, "Savings or checking?" And he said, "Well, checking." And she said, no, don't do that. Put it in savings. And they had a big debate about this. You probably know there's a famous story of a guy back in when they still had operators who called the operator to get the number of a restaurant in Jerusalem, and the operator said, "Nah, you don't want to eat there." So that's closeness. The third thing is this is not a country that does passive-aggressive behavior. I had a son who served in the IDF in a unit called Golani, and he served, and it was very meaningful for our whole family. Also meaningful was meeting a lot of Israeli women. And he was at a bar in Tel Aviv, and he saw a very beautiful and interesting-looking woman, so he got up and he got her number. And then he thought he'd play it cool and wait 24 hours before texting her. About 8 hours later, he got a text from her with an emoji with a middle finger, which I didn't even know existed. And she wrote, "How long does it take to send a fucking text?" And so he asked her out. Why wouldn't you? So it's just no passive-aggressive, just aggressive-aggressive. But the other thing I've noticed is, and I've been in Israel every year probably for the past 30, is that it's a country where people really do fight, but at times of crisis and times of sadness, the whole country turns at one. I was there when the Scuds were landing back in the first Iraq War, and I learned in the middle of the night what people go to bed in. It was very surprising, actually, because we all gathered in safe houses. But I saw then at the Intifadas, whenever there's a terror attack, Dolphinarium, whatever, you see the whole country becomes one across difference. And there's that great sense of thickness and community. And as an American, people who don't often have that these days, there's something to be envied about that. I ran into an Israeli woman who lives in San Diego a few months ago, and she described a moment where she was living in San Diego, and her husband, who was in Israel, called her, and they had a conversation. Then after the conversation, it was about 10 at night, she went in and checked on their little 4-year-old boy, and he wasn't in the bed. And so she started running around the house, and she couldn't find him. And she ran out to the pool to see if he was there, and by this time she's terrified, and she starts running up and down the street calling her boy's name. And then she goes back in the house, and finally she finds in the living room he'd built a little fortress out of pillows, and he was sleeping peacefully there. But the next day, some neighbors came to her and said, "Why were you running up and down the block screaming your kid's name?" And she said, "What kind of community is this?" In Israel, the block would have been filled with people searching for the boy. And so when we Americans look at Israel, we have a crisis of community in this country. We have a crisis of solidarity. I think we should look at it with some humility, because they do community really well. And there's a lot to be learned from that. And so one of the questions to ask is, what exactly is our relationship to this country? We all have relationships to different countries. I grew up in a neighborhood, Jews in New York, a lot of you probably know this. When they wanted to assimilate, they gave their young boys English names, so everybody would think they were English and not Jewish. Names like Lionel, Sidney, Milton, Norman. It totally didn't work, because now everybody thinks they're Jewish names. And so I grew up in a culture very Anglophilic. The phrase was, act British, think Yiddish. And so we had that affinity toward Britain. But we also, of course, have a deep affinity toward Israel. And what kind of affinity is it? The AJC recently asked Israelis, "Do you consider Americans part of your family, and if so, what kind?" 28% of Israelis said Americans are siblings, we're brothers and sisters. Only 12% of American Jews said that. 39% of American Jews said we're extended family, about the same number of Israelis. 31% of American Jews said Israelis are not part of my family. Only 22% of Israelis said that. So it's worth remembering that Israelis feel more affinity and more family with us sometimes than we do with them. And that's a problem, and that's on us. The second thing we learned that as family members is how to have fights in a context of love. I think of the ultimate Jewish relationship, or the ultimate Jewish experience, is you're sitting at a Shabbat table, there are 18 people around the table, all 18 are talking at once, all 18 are monitoring the other 17 people, what they're saying, and correcting what they're saying and why it's wrong. And so one of the things Jews are good at, and I think Israelis are especially good at, is despising each other in a context of unconditional love. Somehow we do that well. And so we should be honest about the differences. What's interesting to me is that it's a background mindsets that are different. Israeli perception of threat is different than the American perception of threat. They live in the part of the world that's most hostile to Jews. We live in the part of the world that's most hospitable to Jews. They are much more pessimistic than we are about prospects for peace in the Middle East. They are much more friendly toward Donald Trump, who's a guy who perceives a lot of threat. They are much more likely to think Jewish settlements in the West Bank help Israeli securities than we are. And that's just the context in which we live and the background mindsets that develop out of that context. The second, we American Jews had slavery, we had a civil rights movement, we had colonialism, and American Jews played a very beautiful role in the civil rights movement. And that is deeply into our mindsets and the way we see the world and the way we see diversity. Israelis didn't have that history. They have a different history, and they see different things in different categories. And so it's important to get out of our mindset and see things through the context of justice and diversity, but not simply through the prison of our own national history. The third background mindset is for a lot of us Americans, Judaism is an ethical system. For Israelis, it's a way of life. Pew Research Center did a study where they asked, what's central to Judaism for you? For American Jews, 69% said leading an ethical and moral life. Only 47% of Israelis said that. 56% of Americans said working for justice and equality. Only 27% of Israelis said that. 49% of American Jews said being intellectually curious is being part of Jewish life. Only 16% of Israelis said that. 42% of American Jews said having a good sense of humor is important to being Jewish. Only 9% of Israelis. A little scary, actually. And so for us, we're Americans first, who have Jewish values. I had a great uncle named Irving Browning, and Irving Browning was an actor in the silent movie era, and then he became a director, and he directed Westerns. And when we went up to his house in Washington Heights, it looked like you were walking into Wyoming circa 1956. He had chaps, he had saddles, he had powder horns, he had muskets, little picture of Irving with a lasso dressed in chaps. That was his vision of America, and he made movies about the Western and that vision of America. Irving Browning himself never in his life went west of the Hudson River. But he dreamed of America. And a lot of us have been blessed by this country, and we are Americans with Jewish values. And that's different. And so one of the things I'm so glad about this conference is the sense that it's not so much about identifying it, though we should acknowledge those differences, but it's about healing. And how do we heal? Well, the first thing, we have a common story. We happen to be living at an age of radical polarization, a age of nationalism, an age of what my friend calls the Great Awakening, which is a sort of tribalism on the left that sometimes leads to anti-Semitism and hostility to Israel. When I was a foreign correspondent in the 1990s, I had a little kid, this kid who then served in the Israeli army, and he wouldn't sleep unless you drove him around in a car. So I used to drive him around the West Bank, and he would sleep in the back of the car. That was his nap. You couldn't take that drive today, because from 1990s, when with the Oslo peace process, the fall of the Berlin Wall, Mandela coming out of prison in South Africa, the Maastricht Treaty, the reunification of Germany, the end of the Soviet Union, that was a great dawn when it seemed like boundaries were coming down and divides were healing. For the past 25 years, we've seen the rise of illiberalism, the rise of authoritarianism, and the rise of tribalism, and we're part of that. And yet what we have, I think, in common most of all is that common story, that common Exodus story. For me, as I've gotten older, I used to think the Exodus story was just a story you read and might provide some guidance. Now I think the Exodus story is the ground of truth, the ground of spiritual truth. It's the story that Jews have made true by living into it for century after century, and it's passed from the realm of story, which I used to think it was, and I now conceived of it as ultimate transcendent truth that we live out. Something connected to something deeply and morally and spiritually real. Rabbi Kook put it clearly, with a penetrating consciousness, we come to realize that the essential event of the Exodus is one that never ceases at all. The public and manifest revelation of God's hand in world history is an explosion of light of the divine soul, which lives and acts throughout the world. The journey of Jewish unity, and frankly, the journey of all unity, is a journey inward and then expanding outward. Getting below the head, which we tend to prioritize in our culture, and getting deep into the heart and the soul. Some people believe in God and some people don't believe in God, but I ask you to believe that you have a soul. I ask you to believe that there's no piece of you that has weight, size, shape, or color, but it is of infinite value and dignity. And what this thing, and that slavery is wrong is because it's an obliteration of a soul. Rape is not just an attack on a bunch of physical molecules, it's an obliteration of human soul. And what this soul does is two things. It gives us moral responsibility. We're not responsible, a tiger is not responsible, a river is not responsible. We as human beings are morally responsible. And the second thing it does is it yearns for righteousness. I've interviewed a lot of people around the world, a lot of people who did really bad things, and I've never met anybody who didn't want to be good. What the soul yearns for is to fuse with one another and to fuse with some sense of ultimate good and ultimate truth. And for us, that ultimate good and ultimate truth is in the Exodus story. It's in a fractious people who were not ready for peoplehood but had to be formed into peoplehood. And then they had to tell that story again and again. And in our fractiousness, we're still the whining SOBs that crossed the Sinai. But that unity is not at the top of our heads, it's deep and spiritual. And Jews don't often speak about spiritual matters in public or frankly about faith as much as we should. But that's where the essential unity is, deep at the lowest level where the ties will never be broken. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll take some questions. Now you have a chance to talk to David Brooks. Text your questions through the Evenium app. It'll pop here on the screen, down here for us to take a look at. Let us know what your questions are.
All I ask is the questions be long and rambling with no question at the end.
You'll never get that from a group of Jews like this, I'm telling you, no. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to thank David Brooks for your brilliant presentation, your brilliant speech, so personal. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, we have one. We have one. This is the big one question. What do you think of the UN position on Jerusalem? Dave, that'll be the first one, the last one, then we'll keep going here, all right? Thank you.
Listen, this is my general view frankly, of the whole situation is that I'm a believer in what reality is. If Jerusalem is a Jewish city, if you go to Jerusalem, it's a Jewish city. Frankly, Ramallah is not a Jewish city. And so I'm for withdrawal from some parts of the settlement because you land there, Ramallah, Hebron, they're not Jewish cities. But Jerusalem is a Jewish city. It's the spiritual home of the Jewish people. And I'm for respecting reality and building a peace on the basis of that reality. And so you didn't think I was going to defend the UN here, did you? I would just say one final thing, if I could take 1 minute. Sometimes, it's so funny for me I've spent the last year with the Aspen Institute traveling around the country asking, okay, now we're back, trying to investigate the divisions in our own country. And it so often has reminded me about the divisions between Israelis and Arabs. And that sometimes it's not even a dispute about land, it's a dispute about narratives, and each side wants the other side to apologize and say, we were wrong all along, and your narrative was right. And that's just a way that never produces peace. And the second thing that I find people getting out of that, and you mentioned this with the way this conference is organized, it's usually the wrong question to ask, what is the problem here? Because the problem is a negative, deficit-based conversation. It's usually the best way to get out that I see in community building around this country to ask what are the possibilities here, to have a possibilities conversation, to have asset-based thinking. What are the things we are going to build over the next 25 years? Rabbi Sachs pointed out that the creation of the universe is described in Genesis in like 9 lines. The design for the tabernacle is designed in hundreds and hundreds of lines. Why did one thing get so much more treatment than the creation of the entire universe? He says it's because people are joined together when they build a common project together. And it's that possibility story of building a common project that will unite Jews and Americans, and eventually will unite people in the Middle East. Thanks a lot.
All right. We got one more. They figured out how to use the app. Questions are coming in. We have time for one more question. Sorry for the delay, but here's a question from Gary Rand. In your professional life, does the question of your being Jewish come up, and how do you handle it? Thank you, David.
I work at the New York Times. What do you think? I'm actually always disturbed by how few Jews there are there. I shouldn't say that in public. I would say it comes up in this way. Frankly, I've always thought that politics is I cover politics, but I have always thought that politics is a limited activity, that the most important part of our world is the relationships we have, our connection to our ancient past, and how we're carrying on traditions. And so I've never in my life lost a friendship over politics. Because I think if you ask politics and partisan affiliation to give you a sense of identity and a sense of moral purpose, you're asking of politics more than it can offer. And you're turning politics into an idol. And idolization is like addiction. At the beginning, it feels good, but more and more you ask more and more of your idol, and it offers less and less, and eventually you ask for everything and it gives you nothing, it destroys you. And so I've been a conservative. My joke is that being a conservative columnist in the New York Times is like being the chief rabbi at Mecca, not a lot of company there. But having been grown up with a heritage that goes back thousands and thousands of years, I think has just created this whole mindset where I put politics in its place. And I realized the stories of Ruth and Naomi and the sense of commitment that story exemplified, and the story of Boaz and his love, it's just always much more important. And so it's made me, I hope, a slightly deeper person, a more sensitive one, I hope. I'm the only American man to have finished that book, Eat, Pray, Love. By page 123, I was actually lactating, which was amazing. But I hope Judaism has given me that sense of chesed. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, by video, please welcome Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, former Chief Rabbi of the United Kingdom.
To all of you at the Oshman family JCC in Palo Alto, to Giddy Greenstein, to Reut, to all of you at Z3, Shalom uvracha, and I wish you success in your deliberations, because the conversations you're about to have over the next few days are among the most important in the Jewish world today and the most fateful, because you will be considering what is the future of Israel, what is the future of diaspora Jewry, what is the future of the relationship between them. And these are all at critical moments, at crossroads. And what we decide now and what we do in the next few years will affect the fate and direction of the Jewish people for generations to come. Where are Israel and the Jewish people today? We've been around a long time, the better part of 4,000 years since Abraham and Sarah began their journey. And yet, at no time in all those centuries did we have what we have today simultaneously: independence and sovereignty in the state of Israel and freedom and equality in the diaspora. And what's more, they are both at remarkable moments in each way, because Israel today is more successful militarily, demographically, economically, technologically than any of the early Zionist dreamers could have believed. And as for diaspora Jewry, according to the latest Pew Research, Jews in America are the most respected of any minority whatsoever. So we have this coming together of the answer to all the dreams and prayers of Jews for more than 100 generations. And what are we doing with it? The short answer is we've arrived at this incredible mountaintop and we don't know where to go from here. So let me suggest exactly how we should think about it. And I can do this by dividing the story of modern Jewry into 3 chapters. The first was the 19th century. That was the century of Jewish dreams. It began with the dream of emancipation, and the century ended with a new dream, Herzl's dream, of a return to our ancestral home of a Jewish state in the land of Israel. The 20th century was the century of physical struggle, of tragedy and triumph, of Shoah u'Gvura, of the Holocaust and the state of Israel. So the 21st century will be the time not of physical, but of intellectual and spiritual challenge. For the first time in all of our history, Jews can lead from the front. Why? Because all the problems besetting humanity now, global uncertainty, accelerated, unprecedented change, not knowing what tomorrow may bring, all these things Jews have experienced for longer and more acutely than any other people on the face of the earth. And we came through it all. We were never defeated. Not only did we survive, we thrived. Nobody carries that authority the way Jews do. And that is why we really should lead from the front. In 1756, Voltaire, the great French intellectual, wrote one of the most anti-Semitic pieces in history in which he said Jews have not contributed a single new idea to the whole of human civilization. Well, you know what happened next. For the next 200 years, Jews rejoiced in proving him wrong. They came up with more pioneers and shapers of the modern mind than any other people. Now, let me be our 21st century Voltaire and say what I believe to be true, that in the last 100 years there has not been a single new idea about either Zionism or Judaism. Go ahead, not and make my day, go ahead and prove me wrong. Let me end by relating this to Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the story of a military victory of the Maccabees, a small group of passionate Jews, over the Seleucid Greeks, one of the great world powers. But is that how Jewish history has remembered Hanukkah? No. Jewish history has remembered Hanukkah in a completely different way. In a story about a single cruse of oil found undefiled among all the wreckage of the temple that was able to be lit so that the menorah could be rekindled, and that instead of lasting one day, lasted for 8. The first take on history was that Hanukkah was about a military victory. But the ultimate truth is that Hanukkah was really about an intellectual and spiritual victory. Out of it emerged the people whose heroes were teachers, whose citadels were schools, whose passion was ideas and education, the people who outlived every other people because we were the people of spirit, who knew that military victories are essential, but they're only the first draft of history. What lasts are the spiritual victories. Let that be our challenge as a Jewish people in the 21st century. Let us write our version of the Hanukkah story.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Giddy Greenstein, founder of Reut Group and co-presenter of Z3.
It's really a phenomenal moment to be here. I want to start by thanking Zack and the amazing, amazing team of the Palo Alto Oshman family, JCC, and the board. I want to give a shout out to your board because the board took a big bet on this relationship, on this conference. And really a few weeks ago, there was a concern that such a heavy conference, substance-focused, would not sell. But here we are today with a sellout. And I think it's a testament to this amazing community that we are in. It's a special, special moment to be here. Thank you. I want to start by thanking Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. Rabbi Sacks is the greatest living thought leader of our time. He's an Orthodox rabbi that speaks to all Jews. He's a Jewish leader that speaks to non-Jews, and a Jewish voice on global human challenges. And we're very, very proud that Rabbi Sacks and his team have been so excited to support us. He personally told me that he would have been here if he could. He had a conflicting obligation somewhere else. But his team has been awesome and really empowering for our cause. But what is Rabbi Sacks telling us? He's saying that this is the best time ever to be Jewish. We have never had more power, affluence, and influence in Israel and in world Jewry, separately and together. In many ways, the arc of history has bent finally our way. But Rabbi Sacks is also saying that we're facing the unprecedented challenge of success. Our history and the wisdom of our sages have taught us to transcend powerlessness. Now, we need to thrive as a superpower. This insight is true in many areas of Jewish life and Israeli life. But we are here today to focus on the challenge that our success brings to the entire Jewish people, namely the State of Israel and world Jewry combined. And in this regard, we have to acknowledge that this is a moment of crisis, because we're drifting apart. It is a top-down crisis of frustrating government policies in Israel, but also a bottom-up crisis of Israelis that don't care enough and world Jews that disengage. This crisis has deep roots. Zack mentioned some of them. In Israel, decades of negation of diaspora life led to a toxic combination of arrogance and ignorance that underlie a domineering outlook that we have to admit sometimes has even been abusive. We have to fix that with more modesty, respect, and knowledge. Meanwhile, in the diaspora, Jews rarely stand up for their legacy and destiny in Jewish history and society as diaspora Jews. We have to fix that as well. This crisis is not acceptable. It's bad for our interests and our ethos. World Jewry is much weaker if it is estranged from Israel, and Israel is much weaker if it is distant from world Jewry. So we are here in Z3 to participate in shaping the coming chapter in the relations between Israel and world Jewry. As both Judaism and Zionism will continue to evolve, the relationship between them must evolve too. And as we approach this sacred work, we, meaning the Oshman family, Palo Alto, JCC, and the Road Group, when we brought this together, we're also putting forward an outlook for you to look at and to think about. This outlook holds the Jewish people to be a societal whole that is much stronger than the sum of its parts. It holds the purpose of Zionism and Israel to serve the continued significant existence of the entire Jewish people. It holds the mission, this mission to mandate that a vibrant diaspora is a Zionist imperative, and that both Israel and world Jewry are crucial for Jewish destiny. We hold that a healthy relationship between them requires top-down policies combined with bottom-up engagement. We hold that the divide we must bridge is not between Israel and world Jewry, as is often said or described, but between those who believe in Israel's mission to be the state of all Jews and those who don't, those who embrace Jewish peoplehood and those who don't. What are we trying to do here? What should each and every one of you want to experience? Today, we seek to understand the overall condition of the Jewish people, to discuss its desired direction, and to identify ways to make it stronger together. We seek to identify new ideas that we can pilot, model, and scale. We seek engagement that is broader than ever. We seek to move the needle. But there is one idea that hovers over everything we do. It's peoplehood. This is the binding ideology of the movement we're trying to create here. Peoplehood holds all Jews to share a legacy and a destiny, that to be tied together by mutual responsibility, basically as a family and a tribe. Some of the pioneers of modern people who are actually sitting here among us, including my first two teachers, which are Dr. Shlomi Ravid and Avraham Infeld. Yes, they deserve this. Way ahead of their time and a curve. Now, you know, when I was preparing this speech, someone here told me, will remain nameless, that there's a few people in the audience that have an issue. They're not sure that these words can actually fly. Peoplehood, 21st century Zionism, nation state, etc., etc. It's too heavy. And my instinctive response was the following. As long as people here keep frequenting a restaurant called Le Pain Quotidien, they should be able to handle Jewish peoplehood. Now, the secret sauce of Judaism, of the Jewish people, and Zionism is always available to us. We're a dynamic and adaptive people, and a national movement that has always blended old and new, innovations and traditions, flexibilities and rigidities. Indeed, we may be facing an unprecedented challenge, that challenge of success, but we do so armed with a wealth of Jewish thought from the Tanakh, the Mishnah, the Gemara, from the legacy of Bavel in Yerushalayim, from the writings of Herzl, Echad Ha'am, Aleph Dalet Gordon, David Ben-Gurion, and even the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It should now be our goal to educate ourselves, to form our opinions, and ultimately, hopefully later today, make a commitment to leadership and action. Together out of here, we can make a big difference. Rabbi Sacks has just challenged us to greatness. This conference is an opportunity for all of us to step up. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Doron Cracow, President and CEO of JCC Association of North America.
Good morning and Chag Sameach. It is my privilege to introduce the first panel discussion on this remarkable conference, but before I do, I need to pause to remind everybody in the room of the exceptional nature of a conference on 21st century Zionism taking place here in the United States, and the more significant fact that that conversation is being convened by the Jewish Community Center here in Palo Alto. It is largely unknown or overlooked, I believe, that the 160 JCCs that dot the United States and Canada welcome more than 1.5 million people through their doors each and every week, making us the largest platform for Jewish communal engagement on the continent. That this conversation is being convened here in the town square of Jewish life in Palo Alto in the East is a tribute to the leadership and the vision of the leaders here, Zack Bodner, the Ashman family JCC's CEO, and his board president, Nicole Reuvin, and immediate past chair, Susan Saul. Because what is happening here is so remarkable, more than a dozen leaders, board members, and professional leaders from across the JCC movement have gathered here with us today in order to see the product of your vision and your inspiration and to determine how we can scale and bring this conversation to JCCs and cities and towns across the continent in the weeks, months, and years to come. The fact that this conversation is taking place in a JCC is substantial. The fact that this conversation is taking place in California is noteworthy. The fact that a conference on Zionism in the 21st century is so unusual is remarkable, both for the opportunity it presents and the fact that the conversation has grown so quiet on the Zionist agenda in recent years here in the United States. In many respects, as was alluded to by Gidi, by David Brooks, by Rabbi Sacks, we are living in the single greatest moment to be part of the Jewish world since the fall of the Second Temple. In this golden age moment of Jewish history, somehow we feel increasingly divided. We feel the weakening of the fabric of the strength of Jewish community. We decry the fact that the traditional institutions of Jewish life have seen lesser and lesser affiliation and engagement. And this conference is an opportunity for us to stand up and say we're going to reverse that trend. Managing our role as leaders in this golden age moment in Jewish history is what this conference is about. Managing the leadership role of Jews here in the diaspora is a critical challenge for us. Managing the way in which we engage the topic of Israel requires us to raise our game. In a period in which, broadly across the North American Jewish landscape, roughly 95% of the time the topic of Israel comes up, it is about the subject of politics and peace process or religion and the Orthodox secular divide, leaving us without voice to the remarkable array of initiatives and faces and opportunities that Israel provides both to itself and to the world, around which we would be uniformly united, from which we would draw both inspiration and energy, and about which we should be shouting from the rooftops. Israel and its world in global disaster relief. Israel, the land of the Bible. Israel, the home of water research that has transformed a dry and arid corner of the world into a water superpower. Israel, the diverse. Israel, the architect. Israel, the dreamer. Israel, the startup nation. We must broaden the nature of our conversation about Israel if we are to raise people's consciousness that Israel is a subject not only around which we should passionately disagree, and we should, but also around which we should passionately take pride and honor. It is my great privilege to introduce to you a remarkable panel of thought leaders and visionaries in their own right. I will introduce all three of them briefly, but encourage you all to look to your program guides for the far more comprehensive explanation of their incredible accomplishments. I will introduce all three now, and then we'll invite them to join me on the stage. Our first panelist, having served as a member of Knesset for 5 terms, currently serves as chairman of Hillel Israel and has established Beilin, Business Foreign Affairs, a global consulting firm where he serves as president. You will know him more likely from his remarkable work as one of the creators of Birthright Israel and an architect of the Oslo Peace Accords, Dr. Yossi Beilin. Our second panelist is Dean of the Humanities at Ono Academic College, the largest private college in Israel. She is the author of Are You Not a Man of God? Devotion, Betrayal, and Social Criticism in Jewish Tradition, Dr. Tova Hartman. And our final panelist is the author of several books, including the most recently published The Zionist Ideas, an update of Rabbi Arthur Hertzberg's remarkable overview of the Zionist movement in his original Zionist idea. Gil Troy is a professor of history at McGill University, a renowned speaker and columnist, and the third of our 3 panelists. Please join me in welcoming all 3 of our remarkable panelists to the stage. For each of our panelists and for the members of the audience, I think you understand the nature of our goals here for the day. We are exploring together the vision of a third phase in the Zionist movement, a Zionist movement for the 21st century. Our goals for this session are to get that conversation started, and I'm privileged to invite Gil Troy to offer a first thought this morning.
Well, Boker Tov. This is amazing. As the historian in the room, I have to point something out, that a century ago, in 1919, the congressman from San Francisco, a man by the name of Julius Kahn, said, "The United States is my Zion, and San Francisco is my Jerusalem." And the Bay Area was often a center of anti-Zionism. So all of you from the Bay Area, you don't belong here. And Herzl and Ben-Gurion said that the American Jewish community was going to assimilate away. So all of you American Jews, you don't belong here. And Yitzhak Rabin said that any Israeli who left had betrayed the state. So you don't belong here. And Israelis, you know, you were taught to only get up and speak to American Zionists and say, you don't live in Israel, you're not good Zionist. So none of us belongs here, and yet all of us belongs here. And what that teaches us is 2 very important things. One, movements change. It's true, as Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks said, that some of the fundamental ideas haven't changed. We are a people, we have ties to a land, and we're committed to one state. That is the Zionist idea. But today we live in a world with the Zionist ideas, and we open up the conversation. And a lot of the conversation this morning has been talking about the Israel-diaspora relationship, and that's very important. But those of us nut jobs who call ourselves Zionist, when we're told, oh, the word doesn't poll well, and there's no greater crime in America today than not polling well. When we're told, oh, it's no longer fashionable, we have to acknowledge two things. One, the elephants in the room. And that's not just a knock against the GOP. We have challenges when we stand up and we say we're Zionist. Putting the politics aside, putting the tensions we've enumerated aside. There's a new N-word out there. You're not allowed to use the word nationalist. And I can't explain America without the word nationalism, and I can't explain Zionism without the word nationalism. So before we get to Zionism, before we get to anti-Semitism, before we get to all these other things, we've got to take back the night and see that nationalism is a neutral tool. And we heard today a word that often isn't associated with Zionism, spirituality. And we have to bring that back into the conversation. And we have to also have a bit of an exorcism. I don't want this next couple of hours to be a meeting of the III, the Israel indignation industry. I don't want to hear the left just going on and on about all of Israel's crimes. I don't want to hear the right going on and on about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. That will make this conversation fail. What we have to do is instead look at the possibilities. Did you hear what David Brooks said? Embrace the possibilities. And the possibilities today are this. It's not just about political Zionism. It's what I call identity Zionism. John F. Kennedy said, ask not what you can do for your country, ask what your country can do for you. But we have to ask what can our... No, I blew it. John F. Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I want us to ask, what can our country do for us? What can having an Israel mean for me living in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or Holon? And what can having an Israel mean for me living here in Palo Alto or in San Diego or in New York? How do we use this opportunity to create a conversation which answers the deep questions we're all struggling with? Who am I? How do I find meaning in life? And how am I so lucky to be a part of this common story, this national ideal, this spiritual journey? Thank you.
Thank you, Gil. Yossi, you and I had a chance to become acquainted a little bit early this morning. It's a remarkable privilege to share the stage with you. We'd be very honored to hear some opening thoughts on the conversation from you.
Thank you very much. Well, actually, Zionism 1, Z1, was unique not in the idea of bringing or sending Jews to Zion. There were presidents before, from Pinsker to many others. The main thing was the organizational aspect of Zionism. The idea to convene people in the Congress, the first Congress in 1997, and then to create institutions. The institutional story of Zionism, in my view, is one of the most important aspects of Z1. During Z2, after 48, many of these organizations became impediments rather than encourageous institutions that could help implement the idea of Zionism. There was no need to keep, for example, the JNF one day after the creation of Israel. And it became in many ways, as you may know, a tool to deprive non-Jews in Israel. Then the idea of the UJA, which was very important here for Israel, later on actually made it the relations between a patron and a client, the American uncle and us, a very problematic ones, and kept it until this very day. We are the recipients, but we are a rich country, and we don't have to get donations from America. I mean, the fact that people are telling me, but you know, this Czech relations is very important for us, not for you, kid, for us, for the aunt, for the uncle, I think that this is a very big mistake. To speak about the bonds, which is the highest rate Israel pays for its loans. There is no need. Israel can actually get a loan in any commercial bank in the world, almost. Why should we pay such a high rate? Why should we thank anybody who buy bonds? It is a very commercial activity. We don't need it. And the same is happening here in the last years, when there are organizations in the Jewish community in the United States that we all know are too old to remain there. They should renovate themselves, reinvent themselves, and it doesn't happen. Now, I believe that what we need is to think about new organizations. The Jewish world needs something much more vibrant than the old Zionist organization. The old Zionist organization is not a room for a debate, for the world debate. And we have to invent something else. But speaking here today, I believe that the most important thing is to create the missing link between Israel and the United States. To create a kind of American-Israeli Jewish committee, which we never actually had. The two pillars of the Jewish world, the two Zions, and we have to admit, there are two Zions. They have no place to debate with each other, to share views, to help each other. And we cannot just be satisfied with the general idea, we are one, we should meet each other, including my idea about birthright. I am subjective about it, I love it. I think that it is very important that kids come to, or students come to Israel and they meet Israelis and are impressed and whatever. But we don't have the most important institution. And it feels like somebody doesn't want us to talk to each other in such a way. The problem here, for Jewish continuity, which is for me the most important thing, is that the issue of mixing, of marrying out, is becoming a fact of life. It is, I mean, the idea of Z2 or perhaps Z1 to fight against it is already, you may say regretfully or not, a story of the past. Today, the challenge is to meet this phenomenon and to know how to refer to it, to include rather than to exclude. You have your own life here. You American Jews, those of you who are the American Jews, you have your own challenge to deal with this phenomenon. And we in Israel do not recognize people whom you call Jews or call themselves Jews. This is, in my view, for the future, the biggest problem. We have to talk about many other issues, about Jewish education and anti-Semitism and whatever. But this is the fact. If my granddaughters and grandson will not recognize your granddaughters and your grandsons in the future as Jews, we are doomed. We cannot afford it. And rather than to talk about this issue, we are exchanging love slogans between us. It won't help us. We need an institution, a strong one, which deals with the different questions of how to deal with the next generations of mixed marriages here and on the Israeli side, to prevent and to put an end to a situation whereby the matrimonial laws are the laws of the state. It is the only democracy in the world which has such a situation. You know, when I became the Minister of Justice, the first thing that I said, that I have one dream, to put an end to it, that those who are religious, sei gesund, marry any way you want. But those who are not religious or who do not want to go through a religious ritual should be allowed, like in every other democracy in the world, to marry each other. And I want to tell you, I'm not in this scene of educating rabbis, of hugging more liberal rabbis in Israel who may say, okay, I will see the Ethiopian Jews as Jews, while the others will not, and we'll say, oh, what a nice rabbi we have, despite being an Orthodox and whatever, he is just closing his eye and allows us to. You say in Arabic, moichel teves. Thank you very much. I don't want to educate you. You are a rabbi. Stick to your ideas in the different denominations or whatever. What I want is that as secular Jews in Israel, or that the state of Israel, will allow Jews according to their self-determination, or in some cases their communities. But not to say to them, you are not Jews, you are not allowed, and whatever. Now, I think that it is possible. There is no reason why it won't happen. And my only message to this wonderful gathering, don't end such a meeting with another slogan. Don't say again, we are one, we are mishpoche, we are a family. Okay, we know it already. Those who are here, take care for Jewish continuity. Believe in the importance of Jewish continuity. We already know that. The question is, how can we do it? We must build new institutions, and we can do it. We did it in the past. There is no question why not to do it in the future.
Thank you. Tova, you have been a remarkable agent of change in the denominational universe, in the feminism universe, in the academic universe. You and I had a very interesting conversation about the negation of the diaspora on Friday. Would love for you to enlighten us, please.
Thanks. Thank you. I agree with one part of what you said, and that was that I think the Jews have overdosed on who doesn't belong. All denominations have to take responsibility for that, not only Orthodoxy, but that has been one of our ways of knowing who we are, was by always having someone who we are not. And the negation of diaspora, in that sense, in Israeli identity, at first it began with a very deep need to say there is going to be something different when we build the Jewish country. We are going to try to take our destiny in our own hands. We are not going to wait for the Messiah until she comes. And we can do something. And in that sense, that negation was very understandable. It had to come about because we were trying to create something different. But in that negation, we lost an enormous part of who we are, why should we continue, and we really have we've begun to build an identity on very thin ice. As a psychologist, we know that negative identity is usually one where we always have to create an other who we don't want in order to understand who we are. And it's one of the big tragedies of Zionism, in that they had to keep someone out there who we are not. And in that process, we lost very deep parts of peoplehood. But I sometimes, as a traditional Jew, I often am comforted by parts of my tradition. I don't feel that I necessarily have to reject it in order to embrace a new future. And I think that we're always going to choose some parts of our tradition that talk more to us than others. You know, nobody speaks to the whole tradition ever. Some groups want to claim that they speak to everything, but that's something that we can always question. But when Hillel and Shammai were talked about here in that sweet way that we always disagreed, and we always disagreed because that's who we are, but there was one way to be, that there was one way to choose halakha. But there's a piece in that that's missing, and I think that that's a piece that we can take with us. Hillel and Shammai did not only stay Hillel and Shammai, they then went to become Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, two different communities who for hundreds of years lived very, very differently. Even though it says that halakha was, according to Hillel, it could say it, but Shammai's community lived a completely different existence. Excuse me, it was one day to lose my voice. But what it says, though, in the Mishnah, it says that even though Hillel and Shammai and Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai had completely different laws of kosher, such that this would be completely treif and one would be completely kosher, and had completely different laws of divorce, meaning in halachic language that some would be considered mamzerim, some group would be considered completely illegitimate. They still married each other and they ate with each other. A few hundred years later, of course, we had those who had to neutralize it by making all sorts of halachic other areas. But if we actually come back to some of our sources, there's a way in that the Jewish people had love for each other and could eat with each other. And that's what I hope we could find here.
Thank you, Tova. What you can't see in front of you that I see in front of me is a clock that's ticking on this session, and so I'm going to beg your indulgence about something this morning. I prepared a long list of questions to guide this discussion, but in fact what we're really interested in is a conversation between and among three extraordinary perspectives. So we're going to spend the next 7-8 minutes or so basically opening this forum up for dialogue between them, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask your questions through the electronic medium. Gil, you and I have been in a host of these conversations before. Pick a thread from what you've heard and take us into the discussion, please.
Yossi, I completely agree with you. As an Israeli citizen, as an Oleh Hadash, I work very hard to fight the anti-Zionist rabbinate. I need a civil society in Israel. But I fear that all too often when I come to these conferences, the phrase Israel-diaspora relations is code word for why Israel sucks, if you'll pardon my inelegance. It becomes too easy for us to just go on and on about all that Israel has done to disappoint us. And if this conference at the end of the day comes out with a statement saying, oh, we want the Israel rabbinate to disappear, what will we have accomplished? That is work that we have to do inside of Israel. We need to hear the voice. This is actually a good example of how we work partnership out. We need to hear the voice of all of world Jewry. And I'm not so quick to cut out the 20% who aren't American Jews. But I'd be troubled if we don't take this opportunity to go deeper, because it's very easy. It's a form of otherizing, Tova, actually. It's easy to say, okay, well, we're sitting here, let's talk about their problems. I want us to use the opportunity to say, what are our problems here too? And how do we use Israel as a tool to both build our community right here in San Francisco, right here in the United States of America, and not just say, look, they've let us down once again.
Terrific, thank you.
Well,
Please, by all means,
okay.
It's an open forum.
I'm not running for office. So.
First of all, my point is very structural. I mean, I'm speaking about building an organization. I'm not giving up on the rabbinate or whatever. I need a dialogue. Mm-hmm. I can tell you, I tried it before. I talked about it before. I know about the attempts, and there were attempts to do something like that. They all failed. there is no reason in the world not to have a permanent dialogue, whether it would be between elected people or not. I mean, there are many questions. But if this organization, the Z3, is trying to have a team which will, as we did with Taglit, with Birthright, there was an idea, but everybody said, yeah, kids should come to Israel. It is a good idea, good idea. Thank you very much for a good idea. How much does it cost? Who will pay for it? How will it be done? Which ages? And so many other questions. So first of all, let us have a joint organization. I'm not giving up on the world. We need a worldwide organization, but it is 85% of the Jewish world. And these are the vibrant centers which create ideas, which have the denominations and many other things. I mean, sometimes we are covering the need for a bilateral dialogue by saying the whole Jewish world. This is not the whole Jewish world. We are leading the Jewish world. We have to admit it. It was difficult for us to admit it. For me personally. For me to say two Zions is, you know, Chilul Hashem almost. And I say it today because I know that this is the fact of life. To ignore it will be to give up on my brethren who live here. I'm not ready to do that. And that is why I think that we need a joint place where we can talk and help each other. You need us, as you said, in your challenges. I mean, the American Jewish Jewry, in the challenges about the definition of who is a Jew. It is a very severe question. And with all due respect, I'm old enough to say it, you need me. Mm-hmm. You need me to be involved in it. I'm not a tourist who is coming to Palo Alto and you tell me, you know, we have some problems here, we are going to solve them. It's nice, the activities of the federation. No, tell me your problems. And I will tell you. And the biggest problem for me is, as I said, that we will not recognize Jews who live here. Because this is the end. And we should prevent this in any price. Here, you can help us. I mean, if it is, this is the situation of a very influential American Jewry on the administration, on the Israeli government, because of different reasons, it has to help us, those who believe that Israel should recognize Jews who are recognized as Jews in the most important and the biggest Jewish community in the world outside of Israel.
Terrific, thank you. Yossi, you know, your call for a framework, a body in which Israeli and diaspora Jews should sit together and deliberate over the issues of Jewish peoplehood, echo those that Gil Troy and Natan Sharansky have written extensively about, echo those of Tal Kainan in his new book, God is in the Crowd. The fact that there's a growing chorus of leaders speaking about the need to convene this type of body can give us a cause for optimism that such a thing is in the offing. Tova, you have been a convener of audiences that had previously not convened around these very kinds of issues. What more can you help us to enlighten this topic around?
I would like to say that I think there are not two Zions. I think we are one people, but there can be a Zion and there can be the United States. And the United States is not Israel. We are one peoplehood. We have to work towards a peoplehood, but there is an Israel with boundaries, whose capital is Jerusalem, that leashes in its own place some of the most challenging parts of life. Coming back to Israel, we unleashed this biblical myths of a zero-sum game, that if I have a place there, nobody else has a place there. These are challenges that we have to deal with in Israel, challenges and wonderful parts, and it's something else living in the United States. I don't need to make both of them Zion in order to have deep, deep caring about each other. There are specific and different challenges in each place. But I do think we can, if we look into when Esav asks his father, and he says to him, "Habracha achat lecha avi," after he gave the blessing to his brother, as he says to his father, do you only have one blessing Could it only be for Jacob? Do we not have a blessing also for all others? The biggest sin of our patriarchs and matriarchs is they didn't have a good answer to that. They only thought of it. And in coming back to Israel, we have inherited a very, very toxic zero-sum game mentality. That, however, the issue of the rabbinate and the issue of the law of return and many other things, the ones who are really the most responsible for the power of the ultra-Orthodox are all our secular political parties. Nobody broke a coalition. Nobody left the coalition because of what they had to give up to the ultra-religious parties. They're always, and it's always so people whose whole raison d'etre was civil rights and human rights sat in a government and gave that up for all often very important values. They said, okay, we have to do it now because we're going to try to do a peace treaty. We have to do it now because of the economy. We have to. But in fact, in the 70 years, we have constantly, the secular, the liberals who know better, have constantly given up on the value of who is a Jew in order to maintain political power. And it is us to change that.
That's why the conversation that's being said here is so important. Because no one in Israel is going to stop voting about security, about economy, about any of those issues that are more day-to-day until they see the existential importance of being a part of a people. And until we do that groundwork, until we really understand that we really are interconnected, until we understand that we really need one another in a very profound way, we won't be able to solve the problem of the rabbinate. We won't be able to solve the problem of who is a Jew. Because we first need to remind one another that we have these things in common and that together we're much more powerful. And that's what's been lost in all the finger pointing. That's been lost in all the geschraying. And that's, I think, what we're trying to do today, get back to some fundamentals, and from there we'll solve the problems. But to try with the problems first, we're just going to fail once again.
You know, I want to come back to something that we talked about at the opening of this session, that this remarkable conference is being convened by the Jewish Community Center here in Palo Alto. And Jewish community centers are about enabling the people in their communities to be stakeholders in something larger. A big part of our dialogue and the nature of this dynamic between Israel and the diaspora Jewish world revolves around the recognition that we are shareholders or stakeholders in one another's destiny. It's insufficient to be a people endowed with a sense of history and the things that came before. We have to be endowed with a sense that what we do today becomes the history of tomorrow, and the nature of the Jewish world in which our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will grow up will be dependent as much by how things continue to evolve in Israel, and for Israelis, how things continue to evolve in the diaspora, and how we must be active players and stakeholders in the evolving reality of one another to assure that we protect that stake that has proven so critical to us over a remarkable history of 4,000 years. Again, I'm mindful of the clock, and I'm wondering whether we are ready for opening up questions from the floor. I'm looking to our directors in the room, to the boss. They're going to be on the screen. Okay. So now I'm standing eagerly by.
Maybe it's up here.
Or they could be up here. Very good. All right. So our first question, what would be the charter of an Israeli-American committee? Yossi, please.
I think that what would be important is to screen the main issues on the agenda. Being kind of the parents' committee of the Jewish world, those who answer to the question of why should we be Jews, kacha, because we are a family, we are a tribe, whatever we are Jews. Had we been born Christians or Buddhists, apparently we would not have converted to Judaism. But we were born Jews, and we like it. It is a nice family. The history is very interesting. it is full of pain and love and many other issues. As a person, you want to belong to something, and we are privileged to belong to a very nice family. So it is not more than that. I mean, it is Am Sgula, Or Lagoim, all the slogans, they are all wishes. I mean, we should be a very unique nation, very moral, whatever. We are not always this case, and it's fine. I mean, it is a target, but we should be proud of our history. Of course, the Holocaust is playing a role there. Exactly is difficult to define, but it plays a very important role because this wound is a very recent one. And then to go over the issues which are challenges to Jewish continuity. What should be done in areas like the relations with the others, the issue of Jewish education? I mean, what does it mean for American Jews or diaspora Jews, Jewish education? In our case in Israel, it is very simple. I mean, my grandsons are coming from the kindergarten and school, and they sing Hanukkah songs, and they are having Seder Pesach, as there is Father of Saturday, which was never in my time, but there is Abba Shabbat, Ima Shabbat. Okay, they live in the Jewish holidays. Here it is much more artificial. And whether a very, very intensive Jewish education, especially day schools, are not distancing Jews who want to remain in their communities with non-Jews, are not distancing them from the others. If this is the case, this is a real dilemma that we as Israelis never meet. And so there are so many questions about, I mean, when I'm watching the marriage of the son of the Clintons, the daughter of the Clintons and her husband, and I see a rabbi and the priest marrying them. You know, for a devoted secular person like me, it is like Tselem Baichal. It's awful. I mean, how can I look at it at all? And then I'm saying to myself, Yossi, relax. This is something that you never met, you never saw before. Apparently it happened before, but it was not the Clintons, so we didn't watch it on TV. Now, my dear, what are you saying about it, for heaven's sake? Do you say, okay, if this is the case, their kids will never be Jews to me, which is the instinct reaction. And then I say, are you giving up on them? Imagine that they grow up and say, we are Jews. Good morning. You say, no. I remember the wedding party of your parents. A priest and a rabbi? Nevermore. No. I want to include them. How exactly? What are we doing in order to include them? What do we have to do? What are the tests? What if they say, I am a Christian Jew? We don't know. I mean, I need to talk to you. I need to understand what are you saying about it. And since you don't have all the answers, right? You need me to.
Yossi. So clearly, there's a lot for us to have on the agenda. Gil, I know you worked on a plan again with Natan Sharansky. Is there a soundbite charge for a body of this kind?
Well, Natan Sharansky's insight was the Israeli Knesset meets 3 times a year. If before each of those 3 sittings, in the same way that if they're contemplating some kind of law, they have to go to the legal committee, why couldn't they, if they have a law that's going to touch on the diaspora, let's say on fighting BDS, instead of coming up with some idiot BDS, anti-BDS law, which plays to the yahoos in Israel and makes it harder for us to fight BDS here, at least have an advisory Jewish parliament to the Jewish people, which would, even if we didn't win the argument, we'd at least have a chance to argue it out. So 3 times a year, this committee would meet, let's say 120 Israelis, Americans, the other people who also are Jewish together, and give an advisory opinion. And once that advisory opinion was issued, if it was negative, then perhaps the Knesset would have to do a 2/3 vote, something like that. And this is a way of respecting Israeli sovereignty, because that's what Zack said at the beginning. It's a sovereign state. When it comes to issues like security, there are certain red lines. But it's also a way of bringing in Jews into the conversation, bringing in that Jewish voice. And even if we lose the argument, at least we were there. I think one of the problems is, we talk about John Locke and consent to the governed. American Jews often feel like we're implicated, but we have no consent. And this would be a chance to give at least some sense of consent.
Fantastic. Thank you.
If I can just ask a question?
Please.
Which means also that if, for example, an Israeli law suggests to downgrade the Arabic language, you will invite Arabs to the Knesset?
I wish.
From the Arab world?
Well, first of all, there are Arabs in the Knesset who are voted, right, who are legally, right? But look, Aleph Bet Yoshua. Aleph Bet Yoshua has a lovely definition of Zionism. He says Zionism is a movement that understands that Israel is at once a state of all its citizens, and he means all its citizens, as I do, as we all agree on this panel, but it also belongs to the Jewish people. And it's a duality. Yeah. F. Scott Fitzgerald said the mark of intelligence is holding two different ideas in your head at once. There's something special about the Jewish connection to Israel, and so I want the democratic processes of the state of Israel. And by the way, I don't just want to rely on Arabs to fight a stupid law against Arabs. I want to rely on Jews to fight that law.
But you don't have them.
Well, we need to work on politics together.
I'm going to ask, I think in our last few moments, the last minute or two of this session, Tova, if it were up to you to decide on the first item for the agenda of the first meeting of this new Israel Diaspora Jewish Committee, what's the first item on the agenda?
I don't know what the first item would be. I could tell you what the third item should be. I'd be too nervous to say this is the most important. But I think it would be how I would like to say, maybe I'll just reframe it because
Please.
It sort of makes me a little anxious to think of the agendas on meetings. I think one of the first agendas, though, would be who do we invite? When we talk about diaspora, who in the diaspora are we inviting? Who becomes part of that? I mean, we have a notion of no taxation without representation. But then who are the representatives of the Jewish people or the people who care about Zion? Who are they? How do we find them? Because I think what we need to learn often is that, and Soloveitchik used to say that the mitzvah of charity is two things. One is to find the person, and the other is to give. Right. So I think just having these kinds of the Jews and the Israelis meeting together, how are we finding all those other Jews who really can be a part of the conversation? And so one of my agendas that would be prior to the meeting would be how do we have our scouts out in all of the four corners of the earth to find those who could be part of the conversation, but by virtue of whatever kind of community, whether kind of socioeconomic status they're in, are not considered the leaders who would have a natural place. So I would like a scouting committee to start before we sit together.
So clearly, the next phase of the conversation has begun. This has been an extraordinary beginning to what I'm sure is going to be a remarkable day. Please join me once more in thanking our remarkable panelists.
Thank you.
Mr. Bodner, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Doron. Thank you, Yossi and Tova and Gil. Thank you, guys. All right, a couple of announcements. We're heading out now to our first session of breakouts. They will start at 12:15. Grab your lunch. Take it with you to eat in your breakout, or you can come back in here and eat. If there is a challenge with your name tag, on the back, you should have your breakouts. If you have a challenge, we have a solutions table right outside the cafe. By the way, don't forget to join us on Evenium. The Evenium app is amazing. There's a great conversation happening. Be a part of the conversation. Be a part of the movement. Thank you. We'll see you at 12:15.